They poured the foundations of New York City, and with it, the foundations of organized crime's greatest monopoly. If you love stories about power, corruption, and the invisible empires that shaped America's biggest city, make sure to subscribe, because this one reveals how concrete became the most profitable racket in mob history. Manhattan, New York, January 1981. A thin envelope passes across a table at Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street. Inside, a list of every major construction project planned for New York City over the next 18 months. The man receiving it wears a tailored suit and gold cufflinks. His name is Paul Castellano. He controls the Gambino crime family. The man who delivered it works for the New York City Buildings Department. He leaves with $10,000 in cash. This is not a new arrangement. This is how business has been conducted in New York for decades. The story begins earlier, much earlier. Vincent Arlo, a capo in the Genovese family, sits in a social club on Mulberry Street. Across from him, Ralph Scopo, a labor organizer for the Cement and Concrete Workers Union, District Council of Laborers Local 6A. They discuss a problem. Concrete suppliers are undercutting each other. Prices are unstable. Profit margins are thin. Arlo proposes a solution. Eliminate competition entirely. Within weeks, Scopo begins organizing meetings with union representatives and concrete company owners. The message is simple. Cooperate or face strikes, sabotage, and violence. First, cooperate. By summer 1951, a framework is in place. 6 concrete companies control all major pours in New York City. They do not compete. They divide projects among themselves. Prices are fixed. The mob takes a percentage of every contract. The companies are S and A Concrete, Dick Underhill, Transit Mix Concrete, Certified Concrete, XLO Concrete, Arc Plaster, and Concrete. Each has silent mob investors. Each pays tribute to one of the 5 families. Each understands the consequences of breaking the rules. A developer files permits for a 12-story apartment building on the Upper West Side. He receives 3 bids for the concrete work. All 3 bids are nearly identical. All 3 are 20% higher than he expected. He complains to the buildings department. Nothing happens. He tries to bring in an independent contractor from New Jersey. The contractor's equipment is vandalized overnight. Trucks are torched. Workers are threatened. The contractor pulls out. The developer accepts one of the original bids. This pattern repeats across the city. Hundreds of projects. Thousands of contracts. The concrete cartel operates in plain sight, but no one speaks publicly. Fear is more effective than silence. Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno takes control of operations for the Genovese family. He expands the cartel's reach. He adds plaster, drywall, and masonry to the monopoly. He increases the mob's cut from 2% to 5% of every contract over $1 million. Salerno works closely with Ralph Scopo, who now leads the Concrete Workers Union. Scopo can call strikes on command. He can shut down any project in the city within hours. This power makes him indispensable. It also makes him wealthy. By 1955, the cartel controls an estimated 85% of all concrete poured in New York City. Annual revenue exceeds $200 million. The mob's take is $10 million per year. This money flows upward into the family's war chests, financing drug operations, gambling, and political corruption. The construction boom accelerates. Urban renewal projects multiply. High-rise buildings replace low-rise neighborhoods. The demand for concrete explodes. The cartel raises prices again. Developers have no choice but to pay. Paul Castellano, now underboss of the Gambino family, meets with Fat Tony Salerno and representatives from the Colombo, Lucchese, and Bonanno families. They formalize the structure. Each family receives a designated percentage of contracts based on territory and influence. Disputes are settled through a commission, a governing body of family bosses. The agreement is known internally as the Concrete Club. Membership is exclusive. Enforcement is absolute. A contractor in the Bronx tries to operate outside the cartel. His office is firebombed. His bookkeeper is beaten unconscious. His bank accounts are frozen through mob-controlled union pressure. He declares bankruptcy within 3 months. The Genovese and Gambino families solidify their dominance. Fat Tony Salerno oversees the Genovese interests. Paul Castellano oversees the Gambinos. Together, they control more than half of the cartel's revenue. Castellano invests heavily in legitimate businesses. He purchases interests in multiple concrete companies, including Scaramix Concrete and Twin Concrete. He uses frontmen to obscure his ownership. On paper, he is a businessman. In reality, he is a crime boss using construction to launder millions. Salerno takes a different approach. He prefers direct cash payments. Every Friday, a bagman visits his office at the Palmer Boys Social Club in East Harlem. The bagman carries a briefcase. Inside, envelopes from contractors, union officials, and suppliers. Salerno counts the money personally. A federal investigation begins. The FBI receives tips about bid rigging and labor racketeering in the construction industry. Agents interview contractors off the record. Most refuse to cooperate. Those who do provide limited information. They fear retaliation. The investigation stalls. Without testimony or physical evidence, prosecutors cannot build a case. The cartel continues operating without interruption. Construction of the World Trade Center begins. The project requires unprecedented amounts of concrete. The cartel views this as an opportunity. Salerno and Castellano negotiate directly with the Port Authority. Prices are inflated by 15%. No one objects. The project is too important to delay. Over the next 3 years, the cartel supplies concrete for the foundation, core columns, and floor slabs. The mob's profit from the World Trade Center alone exceeds $8 million. Ralph Scopo expands his control. He is now president of the Cement and Concrete Workers Union, District Council of Laborers. He commands 12,000 union members across 5 boroughs. His authority extends beyond strikes. He controls hiring. He controls scheduling. He controls which contractors work and which do not. Scopo meets regularly with representatives from the 5 families. These meetings occur in rotating locations: restaurants, social clubs, construction trailers. The agenda is always the same: divide upcoming projects, set prices, resolve disputes. A typical meeting lasts 30 minutes. Scopo arrives with a list of projects and their estimated budgets. The families negotiate percentages. Handshakes finalize agreements. No contracts are signed. Everything operates on trust and fear. Paul Castellano rises to boss of the Gambino family after the death of Carlo Gambino. Castellano inherits the family's construction rackets, including concrete, trucking, and waste management. He immediately increases pressure on contractors. Payments must arrive on time, no exceptions. Castellano operates from his mansion on Tot Hill in Staten Island. The house is known as the White House. It has 17 rooms, a swimming pool, and a view of the Verrazzano Bridge. Castellano conducts business from his dining room. Associates arrive daily with cash and reports. Castellano's primary enforcer in the concrete racket is Salvatore Gravano, later known as Sammy the Bull. Gravano owns a construction company called Marathon Development. The company bids on projects across the city. Gravano uses his mob connections to win contracts. Competitors who underbid are visited by Gambino associates. They either withdraw their bids or face consequences. The cartel's control becomes absolute. Every major development in New York requires approval from the Concrete Club. Projects under $2 million are allowed to operate freely. Anything above that threshold belongs to the mob. Developers learn to budget for the mob tax. Architects include it in cost estimates. Banks account for it in construction loans. The system is so entrenched that it becomes part of the city's economic infrastructure. A veteran contractor later describes the process. You submit your bid. You get a call. Someone tells you the bid is too low. You revise it. You get the contract. You pay the difference to a shell company. That's how it works. Everyone knows. No one talks. The construction of Trump Tower begins. The project requires 60,000 cubic yards of concrete. Donald Trump, the developer, negotiates directly with S&A Concrete, a company with ties to Fat Tony Salerno and Paul Castellano. The contract is worth $7 million. The price is inflated by approximately 20% above market rates. Trump later claims he had no knowledge of mob involvement. Federal investigators later dispute this claim. Concrete. Deliveries begin in August 1980. Trucks arrive daily from S&A's plant in the Bronx, Union. Workers pour the foundation and structural columns. The project proceeds without delays or labor issues. This is notable. Most major projects in New York experience strikes or slowdowns. Trump Tower does not. Industry observers conclude that Trump benefited from mob protection. In exchange, he paid inflated prices and asked no questions. This arrangement is typical for developers working in New York during this period. The FBI renews its investigation into the construction industry. Agents focus on the concrete club. They install wiretaps in social clubs and union offices. They surveil meetings between mob bosses and contractors. They build files on dozens of individuals. One wiretap records a conversation between Fat Tony Salerno and a union official. Salerno discusses a project in Midtown Manhattan. He specifies which concrete company will receive the contract. He names the amount of the kickback. The recording is clear and incriminating. Prosecutors begin assembling a RICO case. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act allows them to charge multiple defendants as part of a criminal enterprise. The goal is to dismantle the entire cartel in one prosecution. Ralph Scopo becomes a primary target. FBI agents follow him for months. They document his meetings with mob bosses. They photograph cash exchanges. They record phone calls. Scopo remains unaware. He believes he is untouchable. In one recorded conversation, Scopo discusses a labor dispute at a construction site in Lower Manhattan. He tells an associate to shut it down. Within hours, union workers walk off the job. The site remains closed for 2 weeks. The developer eventually agrees to hire a mob-connected subcontractor. Work resumes. This incident provides prosecutors with direct evidence of labor racketeering. It links Scopo to extortion and coercion. It strengthens the RICO case. Paul Castellano grows increasingly paranoid. He suspects federal surveillance. He changes meeting locations frequently. He limits conversations over the phone. He instructs associates to use coded language. Despite these precautions, the FBI continues gathering evidence. Agents install a listening device in Castellano's home on Staten Island. The bug is placed in the kitchen. Over the next year, it records hundreds of conversations. Many involve the concrete cartel. In one conversation, Castellano discusses a dispute between two concrete companies. He orders an associate to straighten it out. The associate later meets with the company owners and threatens violence. Both companies agree to Castellano's terms. The recordings capture Castellano's direct involvement in the cartel. They link him to extortion, bid rigging, and conspiracy. They provide the foundation for his eventual indictment. The concrete club continues operating at peak efficiency. Projects across the city funnel money into mob coffers. The families reinvest profits into legitimate businesses, creating a complex web of ownership that obscures their criminal activity. Fat Tony Salerno purchases interests in waste management companies. Paul Castellano expands his holdings in construction and food distribution. The line between legitimate business and organized crime becomes indistinguishable. Union officials, contractors, and suppliers understand their roles. They pay tribute. They follow orders. They maintain silence. The system has operated for more than 30 years. Most believe it will last forever. They are wrong. Federal prosecutors finalize their case. The indictment names 8 defendants: Paul Castellano, Fat Tony Salerno, Ralph Scopo, and 5 other associates. The charges include racketeering, extortion, labor bribery, and conspiracy to restrain trade. The indictment describes the concrete club in detail. It outlines the structure, the participants, and the methods. It includes wiretap transcripts, financial records, and witness testimony. Prosecutors estimate the cartel cost New York developers and taxpayers more than $2 billion. Over 30 years, the document is unsealed on February 26, 1985, FBI. Agents execute simultaneous arrests across the city. Castellano is taken into custody at his home in Staten Island. Salerno is arrested at the Palmer Boys Social Club. Scopo is arrested at his union office in Manhattan. The arrests make front-page news. Headlines describe the concrete club as one of the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies in American history. Prosecutors promise aggressive prosecution. Defense attorneys promise vigorous defense. Pre-trial hearings begin. Defense attorneys challenge the wiretap evidence. They argue the surveillance violated constitutional protections. Federal judges reject these arguments. The evidence is admissible. Prosecutors present a detailed timeline of the cartel's operations. They show how contracts were divided. They explain how prices were fixed. They demonstrate how violence and intimidation enforced compliance. One witness, a former contractor, testifies about a meeting with Gambino associates. The associates demanded a payment of $50,000. The contractor refused. His equipment was destroyed. His workers were beaten. He eventually paid. This testimony establishes a pattern of extortion. It corroborates the wiretap recordings. It strengthens the prosecution's case. Ralph Scopo begins cooperating with prosecutors. He provides detailed information about the cartel's operations. He names participants. He describes meetings. He explains how decisions were made. Scopo's cooperation is limited. He does not testify against family bosses. He only provides information about union activities. Prosecutors view this as insufficient. They continue building their case without his full cooperation. Paul Castellano is murdered outside Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street. The assassination is ordered by John Gotti, an ambitious capo in the Gambino family. Gotti seizes control of the family. The power struggle destabilizes mob operations across the city. Castellano's death complicates the prosecution. He was a central figure in the RICO case. His absence removes a key defendant. Prosecutors adjust their strategy. They focus on the remaining defendants. The trial begins. Federal prosecutors present evidence over 6 weeks. They call contractors, union officials, and FBI agents. They play wiretap recordings. They display financial records. The case is methodical and overwhelming. Defense attorneys argue their clients are legitimate businessmen. They claim the unions operated independently. They deny any conspiracy. The jury is unconvinced. The jury deliberates for 8 days. On May 24, 1986, they return guilty verdicts on all counts. Fat Tony Salerno is convicted of racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy. Ralph Scopo is convicted of labor bribery and extortion. The other defendants receive similar convictions. Sentencing occurs in July 1986. Salerno receives 70 years in federal prison. Scopo receives 100 years. The sentences are designed to ensure the defendants die in prison. None are eligible for parole. The convictions dismantle the concrete club. Federal authorities seize assets from the concrete companies. Union leadership is replaced. Independent contractors enter the market. Prices begin falling within months. John Gotti attempts to rebuild the Gambino family's construction rackets. He installs new associates in key positions. He pressures contractors to resume payments. The efforts are less successful than Castellano's operations. Gotti lacks Castellano's business acumen. He prefers flashy displays of power over quiet efficiency. His high profile attracts federal attention. The FBI intensifies surveillance on Gambino operations. The construction industry in New York undergoes significant changes. Without the cartel's control, competition returns. Developers report cost savings of 15 to 20% on concrete contracts. Projects previously delayed by labor disputes proceed without interference. Some contractors express concern. They fear new criminal organizations will attempt to fill the void. Federal authorities assure them the oversight will continue. Task forces remain active. Investigations continue. Civil lawsuits follow the criminal convictions. Developers sue the concrete companies for overcharges. The lawsuits seek hundreds of millions in damages. Most cases settle out of court. The concrete companies pay restitution without admitting fault. Insurance companies also file claims. They argue the cartel inflated construction costs, increasing policy payouts. These cases drag through courts for years. Some reach settlements. Others are dismissed. Ralph Scopo dies in federal prison. He is 63 years old. His death receives minimal media coverage. By 1990, the Concrete Club is a historical footnote. New scandals dominate headlines. Fat Tony Salerno dies in federal prison in 1992. He is 80 years old. His obituary describes him as a powerful mob boss who controlled construction in New York for decades. It notes his role in corrupting unions and extorting contractors. Academic studies examine the Concrete Club's economic impact. Researchers estimate the cartel added $500 million annually to construction costs in New York. Over 30 years, the total exceeds $15 billion. These costs were passed to developers, who passed them to buyers and renters. Every apartment building, office tower, and public project built between 1950 and 1985 cost more because of the mob. The cartel functioned as an invisible tax on the entire city. The concrete industry operates under strict oversight. Federal monitors review major contracts. Union leadership undergoes background checks. Bid rigging is detected and prosecuted aggressively. The concrete club's legacy persists in other ways. The family's infiltration of unions established a model for organized crime. Similar rackets emerged in waste management, construction supply and transportation. The methods refined in concrete were applied elsewhere. The foundations poured by the cartel still support buildings across New York. They remain structurally sound. But the empire built on concrete crumbled. The bosses died in prison. The companies collapsed. The union leaders were replaced. The concrete hardened. The empire did not.